so thrilled that the Bob has asked us to make a presentation, and this is what he did, most of the work. But I'll be the spokesman today. Whatever we have done in this country, he worked in Japanese because he had to help Japanese youth and family to have a good time and meaningful time while they were here. And I always translate to American friends, otherwise they don't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
So we're the team. The content of the presentation is us, but I'll be speaking. And I have a best supporter today, that's our daughter Kyoko's husband, Ken, and who was willing to come from New York to give us the support. Whenever he wants to say something, he can. If he didn't want to say, it's okay too. I prepared the speech so that I don't overturn. In 1978, when Tokyo YMCA was getting ready to celebrate 100th anniversary of the YMCA, a request came from YMCA USA, specifically from Greater New York YMCA. It was a request to send experienced YMCA director with program and administrative skills to run new project of the YMCA to better serve its community and people living. In those periods, the Japanese economy was strong and many Japanese corporations had business in New York. In Greater New York, there were more than 50,000 Japanese people. Japanese family came to stay from 3 to 5 years. YMCA is a worldwide organization, as you know. That was the beginning of the US-Japan YMCA partnership program. And Tatsuo Honma was chosen to be the first director to run this international project.
Yes.
90 years ago, Mr. John Swift from New Jersey went to Japan as a fraternal secretary to help Japan YMCA. This time, after 90 years, Japanese director was asked to come to this country to help American YMCA. That was February 1st, 1979. That was the beginning of this project. Prior, 1961, a young YMCA program director from Kobe YMCA was sent to Hawaii for 2 years training in swimming, fitness, and outdoor activities. First time to be in English-speaking country and very different culture. His anxiety and fear were great, but Hawaii's people extended wonderful hospitality to this young man from Japan. He was well liked by friends in Honolulu YMCA. After 2 years, he moved on to Cleveland, Ohio for further training of running businessmen's fitness club. He was asked to come back to Tokyo in 1964 in time for the last Olympic, Tokyo Olympic in 1964. The Tokyo YMCA had a newly built Metropolitan YMCA Physical Education Department. This young YMCA director was Tatsuo Honma, 60 years ago. And I was with him as a newlywed YWCA director, certified social worker. If we did not have these 2.5 years of experience in this country, earlier times, Tatsuo was not chosen to come to New York in 1979. There are strong recommendations by top national YMCA personnel in New York that this Japanese couple, us, is the one to come to start a new project here in New York. Our background. Tatsuo is from third-generation Christian family in Japan, which is not common. Emiko Honma, Tatsuo's grandfather, became a very famous evangelist in Meiji era. He had a marble business in Yamaguchi Prefecture, hiring ex-prisoners as his workers, helping them to be rehabilitated and send them out to the real world to be useful citizens of the society. My grandfather, Dr. Toraji Makino, came to this country to study at the Yale Divinity School, 1900, long time ago. In his autobiography, he told the story that as a poor student from Japan, he could only buy a loaf of bread a day old. He divided into three and ate 1/3 as breakfast, 1/3 at lunch, and 1/3 for dinner. His classmates were curious, and his reply was always, "I'm so busy studying in this dorm room, didn't have time to go to cafeteria for meals." He was so poor and could not afford to pay meals served in cafeteria. That was the truth. Dr. Makino later became a chancellor of the Doshisha University, the oldest Christian university in Japan, in Kyoto. That was a congregation church related. He was chosen to be the honorable member, citizen of Kyoto City, and lived until he was 95. My early days, I was born and raised in Shanghai, China. My father had a full scholarship to study in Beijing, China when he was 18. And he worked in Toyota company in Shanghai. Lived in China for altogether 35 years, contributed much effort towards the mutual understanding between the people of China and Japan. Our family was forced to come back to Japan after World War II in 1947. My parents and my brother. Japan lost World War II. We came back to Japan with only 3 suitcases. We lost everything. As a teenager, to be thrown into the worst situation was not easy at all. I was determined to become a part of rebuilding our own country and engage in youth work to help my country. After graduating Doshisha University, majoring in social work, I moved into graduate school and received my master's degree in social administration, 1957, from Case Western Reserve University, Cleveland, Ohio. My life was devoted in the YMCA movement in Japan. I resigned my executive position, which held for 15 years, in spring of 1979, to start a new life in New York with Tatsuo. 1964 to 1979, he was in Tokyo YMCA. Tatsuo was assigned to be the program director of the Tokyo Metropolitan YMCA. Tatsuo pioneered in many programs. He created and dynamic approach surprised many YMCAs across the country. Tokyo hosted worldwide physical and recreation consultation during the Tokyo Olympic in '64, inviting YMCA delegates around the world. With new gym and pool facility, the membership grew to 3,000. Some of his signature programs were YMCA of Japan opened the door to female as a full members for the first time. That was the historic change. Snow camp for the handicapped children, swim program for the autistic children with their father's help, early morning bike program for youth, 1 week resident camp for handicapped children, and so on. The motto was sports for everyone. He helped telling that YMCA is not the building, it is the power to create. You are the YMCA. Any program he created within 30 minutes of registration day, it met the capacity of the limit. His energy were beyond anybody's expectation. Tatsuo Honma was a great YMCA director, everybody knew in Japan. Landing in New York City, 1979. The YMCA of Greater New York was not ready at all to welcome a newcomer. It was the board of directors' high dream and great expectation, but each branches had their hardship and reality. The office was situated in unsafe place near 34th and 8th Avenue. Could not hire bilingual secretary, Japanese lady. When the candidate found the office location, she said, "No, thank you, Mr. Honma." No branches were willing to let him use facilities. YMCA of Greater New York were focusing summer boys camp to serve underprivileged youth at that time. They are rough kids, often possessing a knife. So Japanese families were afraid of sending their children to a summer camp. At that time, we often hear the news that police officers were shot near the Port Authority bus terminal. Tatsuo started from -0. No one extended helping hands to Tatsuo. He went to Nippon Club near Carnegie Hall, asking a permission to use a banquet hall of Nippon Club to be used in the morning to run women's fitness class with only 4 members. Each week the members grow. Within 1 year, he expanded 5 locations, Monday through Friday. Local American Christian Church, Hackensack YMCA, White Plains YMCA, Flushing YMCA. American women started to join and enjoy. Culture sharing programs started, hosted by American members. Valentine's Day party, Christmas house tour, Metropolitan Museum tour. Japanese members hosted Japanese culture sharing program through hosting potluck, celebrating Dolls Festival, Children's Day Festival, and so on. Every program was carried bilingual. Translation to English for Americans, and translation to Japanese for Japanese women. I carried that role. International luncheon series, international dinner series was successful. Each time we asked various background people to host and share their culture, introducing new restaurants in the city. As we worked with the Japanese family, we realized mother's adjustment to a new life was so critical. We started coffee break, like our coffee time, in tri-state, asking sustaining members to host, and through informal gathering, we help mothers to understand American culture and how to help their children in new school life. When the children become high school students and getting ready to apply for college, universities in the States, we realized that there is a strong need to help students and parents to understand the process of American college application. We started counseling and testing workshop for both parents and students. It was well appreciated. 3-month summer vacation is something very new to the Japanese children. They only had 40 days summer vacation. they study more than American kids in school. Our summer resident camp grew so fast. 2-week camp for first and third graders, 4-week sports camp for 4th through 9th graders, and 2 weeks camp of the language camp. We serve 400 young people each year and train 45 counselors and summer staff each year. We live together at the Frost Valley camp for 9 weeks each summer, and we became one big family. We train the leaders with leadership skill and expand their program and hope to carry the spirit of serving others with bilingual ability when they go into the real world. We found a home in Frost Valley YMCA and integrated to the Tokyo Frost Valley YMCA partnership. Back to the early years upon our new lives here in Greenwich, I believe that we were the only Japanese family at that time. Tamio was 5th grade, 10 years old, speak no English, no ESL program at that time. Kyoko was in 9th grade. She was a captain of the swim team of her private high school in Japan. Our children's adjustment to American culture were not easy at all. We struggled the first 3 years. I tutored them every day, read all the assignments myself so that I knew what they are learning. They tried so hard, but the family tie became strong that we all came here with father's challenging question, and we would live through this together. But the Friendship House at the Frost Valley. When we approached 15th year celebration, we had a building campaign in Tokyo and here in the States to build a lot. Tokyo YMCA donated $100,000 upon Tatsuo's request that the director of partnership need a director's residence while running 9-week summer camp and ski camp and many other weekends family programs. It picked up speed and we succeeded to build Friendship House in 1996. I believe that Betsy and Tim and Linda and they stayed at the Friendship House overnight, and I think Dean and then the Wood family spent February skiing and came to Friendship House to tour. So I think they are very familiar with it. It is a lodge to house directors, 3-bedroom apartment upstairs, and 3 guest rooms downstairs, plus the Japanese tatami room to share Japanese culture sharing to American friends. 20 delegates came to celebrate when we dedicated the building. Tatsuo's Tokyo YMCA friends and supporters donated 40 cherry trees, not as many as the Branchwood Park, around the Friendship House. After 15 years, cherry tree grew in late April to make it so beautiful. Japanese rock gardens were built later by Japanese landscapers and to make it more perfect. The Friendship House has been fully utilized during the Frost Valley YMCA August Family Camp, where 500 American families enjoy each year. We conduct Japanese culture sharing program workshop, which are attended to full capacity each summer and regarded as the highest program of the entire Frost Valley YMCA. We brought volunteer program instructors who are expert in their field from Japan, and our own alumni of the summer camp leaders serve as a translator, assistant of the workshop. Our daughter Kyoko, this is Kyoko's husband Ken, served as an interpreter and assistant for 15 years. When Tatsuo completed his responsibility and retired after 18 years as an executive, the First Valley YMCA recognized his service and named the first floor of the Friendship House as Tatsuo Honma Culture Sharing Center. What an honor, he felt, which he never dreamed of. No Japanese director served as the professional leadership, top professional leadership for 18 years, coming from Tokyo to start from -0 in New York. When Tatsuo completed responsibility and retired after 18 years of executive, the First Valley YMCA recognized his service and named the first floor of the Friendship House as Tatsuo Honma Culture Sharing Center. After our retirement for 10 years, Tatsuo and I traveled to Japan every year, spring and fall, to run leadership workshops and gave speeches throughout Japan. Late Hobie Brown, the Frost Valley YMCA executive, told us that the Frost Valley was so fortunate to have Tatsuo and Emiko for such a long time. Meantime, Japan YMCA suffered not getting the benefit of having such leadership among themselves. Please go back to Japan every year to help them like we, the Frost Valley YMCA, were helped. To our surprise, August 2011, Tatsuo and I were inducted to the Frost Valley YMCA Hall of Fame as the first ever Japanese to be. Jerry Hankuski, the Frost Valley YMCA CEO, mentioned in his foreword that Tatsuo saw the potential for the collaboration and embrace it as his life work. The result is an international partnership model that has become the envy of every international collaboration around the country. The success is directly related to Tatsuo's commitment and drive to create an international celebration of the commonalities of all people. We owe the debt to gratitude to the Honma family for just Tatsuo, but his wife, Emiko, and children, Kyoko and Tamio, for the sacrifice they have made to make our world just a little bit smaller, as people from very different backgrounds come together and celebrate the beauty of our differences. This is us, 4 of us, working in the summer program. Tokyo YMCA shared their own director, Tatsuo Honma, to USA YMCA for a very unique purpose. But in reality, they sent 4 persons together. One, Emiko, his wife, and Emiko was a real true partner of his life work. And the children, Kyoko and Tamio. Both Kyoko and Tamio share same value of life and work with us all the way from the most difficult time. And our grandchildren, Kazumi and Hazel Fish, his children, carry a torch now, growing up through Frost Valley Summer Camp and work as counselors, village chief during their college years. Mission of the Tokyo Frost Valley YMCA partnership is to serve Japanese community in tri-state area. But our ultimate goal is to help build mutual understanding between U.S. and Japan and toward the world peace. Thank you. The Japanese Culture Sharing Program. These are the real products. It's a pressed flower by a teacher. And this is for 10 years that we traveled to Japan. We're getting old, but we got it. And this album is made by Tatsuo, but this was when we were inducted to the Hall of Fame ceremony. And this is the only group picture I have with our grandchildren, Kazumi and Keizo and our daughter Kyoko, and Ken and our son Tamio flew in from Tokyo to be with us on that day. And then, as you know, this is the miniature of what we have at church. And then I knew that everyone is interested in Japanese cooking. So I brought some books. I cannot give you the dishes today, but we can plan in the near future. This is his autobiography in Japanese. And Go for Broke is the kind of title that his energy. And they're working for YMCA in both US and Japan. And this is the entrance of the flashback. But when this was published, self-published, and then 1,000 copies were shared quickly. And our American friends asked, why do you write English version? I cannot. But our friend, our mutual friends who are American, so bilingual, and they came to say that we'll do it. So this is his English version. And Frostbite is so famous among Japanese, but it's not that famous in this country. And so they said, we have to choose other. And the name is Tatsuo and Emiko. Some of the people said that all the people in America know that Tatsuo did not work alone. He was with Emiko all the time. So they said this should be the title of the book. But we said no, and our children said no. So we said discovery, understanding, and action. Half a century serving YMCA and Japan and United States. And this is very meaningful. When we approached 15th year, this was the logo that he created. He said before he came to this country to start this work, that Japan and US are two different countries. But as we worked together for 15 years, the two countries came together like a one flag. So we use this as a symbol. So,
met Kyoko and I met her parents, I heard from others that there were great expectations of me. I think you understand the depth of why. But what I want to say is that, the Reverend spoke this morning about love, and my wife Kyoko likes to tell me that love is a verb. It's something that we do. And I think you see in the depth of your life's work what you've done, but you do so with a unique combination of skills, because you have vision, which you share. You're also a force. You have a vision, but I think very deeply in a sense of selflessness. I mean, doing for others is just what you do. And perhaps rarely with those other two things, they have great capability. I mean, they can get things done, and they are a team. And Tatsuo may have an idea, Emiko may be the one making the calls, and there's no when Emiko calls. And I remember in my business, I had an office manager whose job was to say no to people. And I heard her on the phone saying, yes, I'll do that right away. I knew she was talking to Emiko. And I think what's left out in it's really a wonderful story. It's they're 40 plus years here now, and so it's not one generation; it's at least two generations have passed. So the children that were at the Frost Valley camp are now parents themselves and have children going to that camp, and the connections that were made, all the people that know each other here here in New York, whether they're Americans, Japanese, or just Japanese, that always have this common bond together. Because they created this community for Japanese living in New York, not just to connect them to American culture, but also because they needed the comfort of their own culture as well. And the relationships that are formed, the sense of volunteerism, which is when Emiko calls and asks you to do something. I'm going to tell this one story, which was Kyoko was maybe 22 or so, and there was a delegation of Japanese businessmen coming to New York, and we're visiting the mayor. Was that at City Hall? At City Hall.
The little baseball team.
Japanese baseball team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Ed Koch was the mayor then. Probably all remember Ed Koch. And I remember Ed because he didn't know anything about baseball. But he was speaking to this delegation, and they needed a interpreter, and the interpreter canceled, and so Emiko volunteers Kyoko. So she's never interpreted before, and the first time she does it, she's doing it for the mayor of New York City. And so, if you remember Ed, he had his way of speaking, and it's too nuanced to really translate to Japanese. And he tells some joke. I don't know if you remember what the joke was, but it wasn't funny. So, and so Kyoko says in Japanese that he just told a joke. I don't know what it means, but just laugh. So everybody laughs. And so Ed is, he thinks it's really funny, so he tells another joke. So she says it again. He just told another joke. So, she did that very well. So my son is 22, and his girlfriend for some 3 years now. She has a birthday coming up in 2 days. But they met, I guess, 4 years ago at Frost Valley Camp. So these are the connections that made and have meaning in life. It's a beautiful thing, and I would often tell people about my blessings in life, but and the kicker for them was I have the best in-laws in the world. And then what people would really think, you can't be that good, and they say, and they even like me. Anyway, just a few thoughts, but you just see. Beautiful. Thank you.
So, Emiko, Tatsuo, when you came to the United States and chose Glen Ridge to live, you could have lived anywhere in the New York metropolitan area. Why Glen Ridge?
Oh, okay. Montclair is next to Glen Ridge, and Montclair is the community sent so many missionaries to Japan, as well as the fraternal secretary of the YMCA. So when they finished, they came back to Montclair area, and most of them continued to work in New York City, the headquarters of the denominational church. So when he was asked to come, and the Westchester and the Connecticut area is where the Japanese business executive lives. So Tatsuo asked Mr. Waddell, do you think we should live there? He said, that's too expensive. YMCA cannot afford. And then also that this is a community where there are quite a few American friends who are familiar with the Japanese, and then one of them is us. So we choose this area. And then one of the educators of the Montclair school system was Mrs. Waddell, and she said Glen Ridge has a very good school. And then at that time, 5th graders and 9th graders. So we decided to live here. And then fortunately, wife is Japanese and the husband is American and worked for the YMCA. They were transferred to Texas for the refugee program. And Mrs. Japanese said she did not want this house to be rented to American. She has to find Japanese. Because they would keep it clean when we come back. So they said, Mr. Honma, isn't this the house that you want to live? we live in Glenridge. And we moved 5 times within 10 years because we were renting. So each time when the lease is up, we have to look around in the Glenridge. That was hard. And I think the hardest thing is to convince the Tokyo YMCA General Secretary CEO that we have to buy a house. And he said, why house? We said, in this country, we have to have a house party with all these things. It's as important as his work. So we said we need a house with a garden and so forth. And finally, we found a house on Flores Avenue. That's where we have lived for more than 30 years.
How fortunate are we?
Unfortunately, we are. And then I think when our children were growing up, and then Tommy was a little league baseball player and basket and so forth. Our children's name on the Glenridge paper more than us. So when we see people, they say, "Oh, Tomio's father, Yuko's mother," and it was not Mr. and Mrs. Honma that we felt. Yes, David.
I have a basic question. Is the pronunciation of your name, your first name is?
Emiko.
Emiko.
The Japanese is kind of flat.
Okay,
American has the intonation, right?
so Emiko and
Yeah.
Tatsuo.
Right.
Okay.
Our name, we call by the last name first. So Honma Tatsuo, Honma Emiko.
Emiko.
It's not really
Yeah, okay.
like that. Yes?
Did you have a part in naming Frost Valley? Was that
What was
Frost Valley, the camp?
it? Did we name the Frost? No.
Oh.
The Frost Valley YMCA is one of the oldest residential camp in this country.
Oh, okay.
And then the Frost Valley's first beginning is the Camp Wawayanda. It's American Indian name
Right.
in New Jersey. And they started with a boys camp. And then 1950s when they become so big, the board of directors using the horses to go around and find this place in Frost Valley, in Catskill.
I
In
know it.
Brownsville, yeah, really, yeah. And has 120 years history now. Yeah, and we are part of it. The Frost Valley is a big 2,000-acre camp with about 700 children every summer. So we were about 1/3 of the camp operation. Yes.
Emiko, how many Japanese families go there now?
I
Each
don't
year?
know.
How many?
I think because of the pandemic, they have to really shrink the size. When we had 5 staff members, Tatsuo and me, and program director, and the office staff and so forth. They shrunk to only 1 3 years ago. And they sent back to Tokyo, and now they have 2. And this summer they're going to run the full camp. So
When you were all there, when you two were there, how many
Right.
families would be there?
right. So
About, it was like 100 plus.
Right. and of course the population of the Japanese population is smaller. Japanese is not as strong as it used to be.
Mhm.
And then they try to delegate the responsibility to the local American people rather than bringing some Japanese people over, which is so expensive. So,
Hopefully when this is all behind us, it'll get back to its original strength.
right. And then also the Japanese population send younger people. We used to have family of the top people and teenage children, that not anymore. They're doing kindergarten and so forth.
You both did so many wonderful things in your work. You were doing camping and athletics and education and community building, and many more things. What role did your Christian faith play in the work and the calling that you felt like you had to the YMCA?
Tatsuo, we skipped many things, but he was boxing champion when he was in college. And our children always said that, Dad, did you study? And he said no. But he was the champion of the boxing. But of course he was a third generation Christian, so at the time that he was to get the job after college, he met some wonderful people and was inspired.
Yeah.
And so he decided to became the general secretary of the YMCA movement in Japan. When he met him, said, Mr. Honma, they said, Honma-san, young Mr. Honma, don't you want to work for the YMCA? And he did not know much about the YMCA. He just see the sign, the YMCA. But he believed in him to say, whatever he said, it must be something good. So that made him the YMCA. So that when we were married, there was some fraternal secretary from America and Canada, and they said, this new young man, Mr. Honma, I don't think he lasts long. Because he doesn't know too much about the YMCA.
Yeah.
And then when he asked him that I'd like to go to the United States to get training, they said, are you kidding? And then they said 3 months. So Tatsuo said, no, 2 years. And they said, why 2 years? And Tatsuo said, 1 year, every day is new. So you learn, but you never have time to test it. 2 years, you have another year to test. And he said, I'd like to go with my wife. They said, your wife? You're not supposed to go single
Yeah.
in Japan. Only the men goes. He said, we have to share the culture, the value together. So he convinced this non-Japanese fraternal secretary to say yes. So that's, but to me, Doshisha is a Christian school, so when I came back from Japan as a 14-year-old girl, I was involved in the YMCA movement, and I met some wonderful, wonderful people who are ladies, women, who went to World Conference and then became part of that movement. I said, gee, I'd like to be like that. So when I was in high school, I was determined that I'm going into the YMCA work. And then I was until I came to this country. And then I didn't have a hesitation to quit the job to be with him. But at that time, the YMCA hoped that I would get a job in the United States in the YMCA. But that didn't work. And he needed somebody. He couldn't get the bilingual secretary because it's a bad location of the Y. And he struggled. So I stepped in.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.